And then, just in a blink of a moment, I saw Marley, my youngest, go from anger and just complete despair. You know? It's like the weight of that moment just fell upon her. That realization all at once that, wow, I can't do this. I'm incapable of putting this train set together. It will never happen. And she started to cry, sob as, a two-year-old do, just like heartbreak. Her world is over. And I'm sitting there watching her, and my heart's breaking for her too. And she looks down at those pieces she's holding to in her hands, just tears flowing from her. And she kind of looks down at them. Then she looks up at me. She says, Daddy, between sniffles, Daddy, I can't do it. Could you help me? In a simple moment like that, where God can come in and kind of give you a picture of what living life is all about. I mean, I cannot describe to you with words, in that simple phrase, Daddy, will you help me? The joy and emotion that came in my heart to know that, oh, she got it, It may have been a hard process for her to get all the way down to that place. But man, she got it. She thought, well, I can't do it. So I better ask my dad. And I had the awesome joy of being able to swoop in and grab those pieces of train tracks and stick them together. And all of a sudden I see, she goes from sobbing and man, the switch turns off and elation and wonder and awe. All of a sudden this huge train set unfolds in front of her and she thinks, well, that's way better than I could have ever done, And I see this joy on Marley's face as she's playing with it and looking at me and this connection that we got to have together because I was able to help her and show her what the train track was really meant to look like, And I was able to swoop in and be there for her. And we had that, man, what an awesome, powerful connection that we have in those moments. And I got the biggest kiss, the biggest hug you've ever seen in the world, this thanks from my daughter. And again, it was like God coming in again and saying, man, look at this. This is a picture of the way we live life. That so often we, are just fed this wisdom of the world. You got to do it yourself. You got to go and you got to accomplish success and you got to, discover power and the ability to do things on your own. And, we go through that whole process of all of a sudden our egos are, just bloated and we say, I have my own skills and talents and abilities. And man, I saw myself in that. Thought, how much stuff do I do through my life and even at serving God that I can get in the midst of it and say, well, wow, I can make that thing great, or I can go and serve in that ministry and my skills and talents are perfect for that, and on and on. And our egos begin to bloat out and we think, man, how great I am. And all of a sudden we hit the road of frustration and on to anger and on to complete despair in our lives. We get to that place of complete despair. I thought to myself, how ironic that oftentimes in the midst of life and however hard life gets, we get to those bottom places, whether by your circumstances of life or by your own admission, finally you realize you can't do it. And in that place of utter weakness, that God can finally get through to us. Marley wouldn't have heard me 10 minutes before that. She wouldn't have thought to come over and say, Daddy, help me. But in the midst of her despair and hopeless weakness, she saw the one thing that could enable her to discover power in her life. And that's where we discover God in heaven coming down to us. And we can look up to him and say, Daddy, I can't do it. I can't live this life like this anymore. And God comes down and wraps his arms around you and me. And we can hear his voice say, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is made perfect in your weakness. My power is most effective in your weakness. In those low points of life, in that place where you are completely in despair and weak, that's when my power is made perfect in you. He's saying, I've been waiting all this time. I've been waiting through the whole process to show you what your life could really be, I've been waiting the whole time where you're going frustrated and you're spewing out anger upon your world. And the whole process, I've just been waiting for you to look to me and say, I need help to show you what your life could really be. and how God can come in and blow our minds with the immensity of what he has planned for us. It just amazes me how God can come and speak to our hearts in that way. And in his power is made perfect in our weakness. He uttered those words first to a man named the Apostle Paul. And as I learned about Paul, I thought, man, if anybody has reason to boast, is this man. You know, Paul was a man of great wisdom and knowledge and stance in his day, in biblical times. He was a man of leadership. He was a man that faced death and consequences of persecution every day. If anybody had a reason to boast and say, I have my skills and my talents and my abilities, and I can do this thing, you know, I can even take this word of Christ to all the nations and to the Gentiles and places people will never go. And if any man had reason to boast, it was him. But Paul knew that true power didn't come from within himself, but true power was found in the midst of his weakness. He knew that his life would be so much greater than it would be if he would say, God, I can't do it. I am weak. Show me your power inside of me. He says to the Corinthian people, who he writes those words in that letter. And the Corinthian people were a people that were just obsessed with the status of people. Man, they wanted to know all of the qualifications of the people who came and shared truth with them in that church. And they want to know who you were and what you did. And they even told Paul that. We want, tell us about all the great things that you do. And Paul says to these people, no, look at me. Look at the weakness in my life. He says in verse 7 through 8 of chapter 12, to keep me from becoming conceited because of these surpassing great revelations, this greatness in my life, there was given me a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. And even 3 times I asked God to take it away from me. But he said, no way I'm not taking it. Because the secret is in this, my grace, Paul, is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. That's the secret, that in our weakness we find God's power. We find the power of heaven on earth, to receive the fullness of God's power, to be witness to his power in our lives, to find his healing, to discover his peace. We have to be weak and embrace our own weakness. So how do we do that? Well, first we need to surrender our motivations. Our motivations and my kingdom mindset have a way of blinding us to the darkness we live in. You know, you could be wading around in life and getting ready to knock your shin on a couch and you'd have no idea about it, you know? And all of a sudden our focus keeps us from really seeing that we need to be embracing our weakness. It keeps us feeling confident in our own abilities and in our own skills. And every time, we focus on our motives and what we have and our kingdom come, we begin to be blinded to the power of God. God says, no, you need to embrace a your kingdom come, your will be done mindset for your life. And we begin to seek out his purpose instead of our own. All of a sudden, it's like the lights are flicked on, and in this hazy shock, we can begin to see around us. All of a sudden, God comes in and allows us to see a little more. When we begin to seek his kingdom a little more in our lives and say, God, what's your will for this situation? Or God, what's your plan for this? And, what's your bigger picture for this situation? Our eyes begin to open. We begin to be open to the power of God in our lives. The mantra of the world not only tells us that we have to do it in our own strength, but also convinces us that we have to hide it from other people. Marley, in the midst of her motivation for going after that train set, Morgan swooped in and said, let me help you. What did Marley say? Man, with all the gusto of a 2-year-old little girl, she said, no way, I can do it. What do you think? I'm not good enough? You think I'm not smart enough to put that train? The world says to us, hey, you better hide your weakness. You better display your power to the world, and you better hide everything that's weak about you, because you, at all costs, can never let anybody see that you're weak, or that you're incapable, that you're unable to do anything. And the wisdom of the world begins to teach us that at all costs we need to hide our weakness. And God's awesome wisdom says, no, it's just the opposite. To discover true power in your life, you must embrace your weakness. You must learn to embrace the weakness of your life. You want to start to surrender your motivations. Your weakness will start to show up in front of your face, and we say, okay, I need to grab hold of that weakness. I need to grab hold of that inability to do that thing, because it brings me to the place where we encounter the true power of God.